This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchioni.
We're having another illuminating discussion on the Practical Prayer Podcast. And I'm back this week from the affiliated New Thought Network annual retreat. And one of the things that was discussed is a new venture called An Awakened Path. And Carol did not see the announcement, so this is a nice, loving surprise for her. And she wanted to talk about that. So I'm going to start by asking you, when you hear An Awakened Path, with the spiritual background and the immersion into the ascended masters and so forth that you have done, what does an awakened path mean to you? And what is it that you could imagine it would be? And then I'll tell you what was announced last week.
Here's what I imagine it to be, because when I heard that, I thought, okay, what do you, a path, it's like, I think we all have a life path, a journey, some call it a journey, but it's a path. And I think that we awaken on that path. I don't necessarily think that we take different paths necessarily. Mm-hmm. I think we are on our life path, and things evolve or come to our awareness as we're going. So we have awakenings, but we're still who we are, but becoming the bigger part of ourselves, or the better part, or the higher self, whatever kind of language you want to use. It just feels like it's part of our journey, and it's an awakening path, as opposed. And I'm not sure of the tense, whether it was an awakened path. I'm not sure that was the word that you used, but it's like awakening on your path of life. And each part, something, when you face a fear and you transcend it, or something that you consciously become aware of and you move it out of the way. And so now you're not on a different path, but your path is, you've awakened on that path, right? As you move those hindrances out of the way.
Yep.
That's what I think.
Okay, that sounded familiar.
Did I do okay?
I think so. And I'm hearkening back to one of the classes that we teach, which is a class in spiritual practices. And it uses the book, The Path of Awakening by Ram Dass. And it is intentionally not the path of awakening, or not becoming awakened, or arriving at a destination, because there is no destination. Awakening is a process. And the awakened path is the step that we're going to take from where we are now to what's next, and to do that in an awake and aware and intentional way. And I love that that's the name that was given to this particular endeavor, which is An Awakened Path, and it's going to be a website and a curriculum and a program and so forth. But basically, what's been going on in the world of New Thought, and you might know some of this, and for anybody who's relatively new to this, I will explain the origins of New Thought, and then how the divisions came about in New Thought, and then what this awakened path means for all of us. So the original theoretical work was done by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And there were people before him who kind of had an idea about this, but he was the philosopher and particularly the writer, who started talking about there is one power and presence, one love, one source, and that we were all using it, and we were all creating our own experience. And he was very eloquent about that, and he was very insistent that we were, it's an inside job. And he kind of left the Unitarian Church and led the Transcendentalists because that was about personal responsibility and creating your own path. He did not say anything about how to do this. He just said it was a good idea. So over the course of the next 100 years, people came along and put some legs on it. Most notably, Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, who was in the mid-1800s up in New England. He said, well, if this is true, then we should be able to heal people through mental action only. And he created a technique for healing people and healed 12,000 people in 7 years. So pretty successful. One of the people he healed was Mary Baker Eddy, who subsequently discovered her own technique of healing, which she founded as Christian Science. Noteworthy that it was the same technique that Quimby used, but didn't include his name or credit. And he demonstrated that it worked. And then there were some people who came along and said, yeah, this is good. And they dove into it. Thomas Troward was a judge in England who had spent a lot of time in India and had been exposed to a lot of the stuff that was going on in India. So he was very amenable to that. And then after he retired as a judge, he was explaining how that worked. And Emma Curtis Hopkins originally started with Mrs. Eddy. And then I think she was an editor of the Christian Science Monitor. And then she realized that you didn't have to do it Mrs. Eddy's way. You could just do it yourself. So she was dismissed from Christian Science and moved to Chicago and started her own school and taught a whole bunch of people, including Charles and the Fillmores, I'm not sure which ones she taught, who founded Unity, which is one of the main branches of New Thought. And she also worked with and or trained Melinda Kramer and the Brooks sisters, who founded Divine Science. And her last student was Ernest Holmes, who founded Religious Science. And so she's the teacher of teachers. So she's kind of the vector point of all of this. And those three went off in their own direction. So there's Divine Science over here and Religious Science or Science of Mind over there. And then there's Unity over in this direction. And Unity split into Unity World Headquarters and Unity Worldwide Ministries. One teaches ministers, one runs the operations. Then there's other schools that are teaching ministry to different Unity ministers. So it's kind of divides up amongst itself. Ernest Holmes' religious science thing split into two branches, United Church of Religious Science and Religious Science International, and they came back together in about 2012. And so there's been this splintering and reassembling, and people along the way have left to do their own thing. Johnny Coleman was trained as a Unity minister and then founded the Christ Universal Temple in Chicago, and then the Universal Foundation for Better Living. So that's her own flavor of the Unity teaching, and it's the same teaching. So these people going off in different directions. Michael Beckwith did the same thing. He was part of religious science, and then he created the Agape Spiritual Center, and he's doing the same thing under a different name. And there are different people who have done that all over the place. And there's been this yearning for the last 3 to 5 years to bring us back together, to remember that we are all one, that we are connected, that we are together. How's that for a long setup of how we got to be separate and dissimilar? So I mentioned that the religious science branches coalesced as the Centers for Spiritual Living, and that was in about 2012 that finally happened. Next month, there will be a vote by the Unity Worldwide Ministries members to see if they want to basically get back together with Unity World Headquarters, so there will be one Unity again. So that's in the process of happening. It's probably going to happen. And the other folks are being much more interactive and cooperative. There used to be the idea that, if I'm Divine Science, I don't have anything in common with the people of Unity. And as we learn more about each other, we realize we're teaching and talking about exactly the same thing and using a different book as our basis. So, an awakened path. As part of the ANTN Retreat last week, there was a big open house celebration on Tuesday night. And we opened the doors. We were at the Goppert Event Center, which is a huge room. The room that we'd been meeting in was a hotel conference room that had a room for about 120 people. And the Goppert has room for about 850. So I said, well, we got some space. So we opened it up to all the people in the area: unity, religious science, questioning, curious, all the rest of that. And probably had 600 people there. And one of the presentations was a cooperative venture that's been very hush-hush for the last 6 months. And it's been in the works for a year, which was ANTN, the Affiliated New Thought Network. And Michelle Whittington has been working on that. She's the executive director. And Jim Blake, who's the CEO of Unity World Headquarters, and Sonny Cantrell-Smith, who's the community spiritual leader for Centers for Spiritual Living. And they stood on stage together and said, we've been working on a new plan that's going to bring all of this stuff together and take this great idea of new thought and bring it out to the rest of the world. And it's called An Awakened Path. Because you don't have to be in one of our spiritual communities. You don't have to be walking between the lines in a particular way to benefit from these teachings, which we've been talking about like crazy, and and has been a universal truth forever. You don't have to you don't have to be sitting in that particular pew in order to have it apply. So An Awakened Path is a way to collaborate amongst the organizations so that we can share educational resources, we can share curriculum, we can share materials, we can have a combined web presence so that people who are looking for this stuff, who don't necessarily want to look for a new church, can make the path that they're on an awakened path. That's very exciting.
Hugely exciting. Yeah.
When organizations that have divided up for all sorts of historical reasons start coming back together, it's really powerful.
Yeah. So I'm going to say this. This is why I find that exciting, because being on the other side of the street, that was one of the things that just wasn't working for me, because you have one idea that we all pretty much agree on, and I'm talking about traditional Christianity, death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ, the whole thing. And everybody agrees with that for the most part. But then there's so many branches and, of the same tree.
Right.
And it becomes, for me, it became extremely frustrating, because then now we don't see ourselves as the same. We see the differences, which are just small nuances. And, so I thought, okay, first of all, I'm not going to ever, if I ever get out of this, I'm never going to commit to another organized religion at all, even if it just kind of hints at it, because the egos get in the way, and I don't know if anybody's ever talking about that, but the ego gets in the way, and then the whole thing just goes kafloo. And so much hurt comes from it, which is a part of what comes my way in terms of religious trauma. All of that is part of it. So it seems to me that what you're saying is that it's saying, listen, it's not like it's something new to New Thought. I mean, there's splinters all over the place under whatever camp you're in. But it sounds like you're saying that New Thought is saying, don't do that anymore. Let's come together. And instead of looking at the nuances of difference, let's look at the root of our sameness.
Yeah.
And that's hugely exciting, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of what it is. I happened to go to a church growth seminar with a guy named Gary Simons, and this was 15, 20 years ago. And it was in the DC area where there's the large presence of divine science. And he was from Unity, and I was in religious science. So he looks around this room Friday night of the workshop, and he says, so we got some divine science people and some religious science people and some Unity people here. Okay. This will be fun. He says, you know what the difference is between divine science, between all of these three? He says, religious science has really good music, and Unity has Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ as the master teacher, because we can do what he said without worshiping him. And that was his whole point. It's like, that's the only difference. And because he knew from the inside, that was basically what you look for. And now there's a lot of cross-pollination. So there's a lot of religious science churches that are having some Jesus, myself included. I taught a class on how to do healing like Jesus because he taught practical prayer. He just used different language for it. And the Unity churches now are having some pretty good music, I must say. And the event last Tuesday, the concert was Ricky Byers, who was like one of the preeminent names in New Thought music. She was fabulous. And the people in the area were so excited. They got 80 people to get together for a choir for free. So all sorts of stuff is possible. And when the barriers start coming down, we start learning more about each other and realize, oh, we have so much in common. It becomes hugely powerful. Hugely powerful. Let's take a break and continue talking about an awakened path and, of course, us.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcione.
A wonderful conversation about an awakened path, which is not only a good idea, but it's a new venture that was announced as a collaboration between ANTN and the Centers for Spiritual Living and Unity at the retreat last week. And even since then, we've got some friends who are involved in bringing the New Thought ideas into interfaith and doing that on an international basis. And they basically said, I'm in. What do we need to do to take part in this? And there's going to be more and more of that happening because the time, I think, has come. This is a concept which is very simple and very basic. And when you brush away a lot of the nuance and detail, it's something that's irresistibly powerful to a lot of people.
Yeah, and it reminds me actually of how I described my thought of it in the beginning, only on a larger institutional level as opposed to a personal level. It's actually, when you say brushing away things, it's addressing our fears, whether we do it on a stage or whatever, but it's addressing our fears. What has made us separate? What are we afraid of? Whatever, and a lot of things to me just go back to fear. What do you think you're going to lose by this, or not be able to gain and move forward? So it's about fear. If you brush that away, then of course it only makes sense to look at how we are the same, in moving forward with that. And I think that's hugely powerful. With the studying that I've done over my time, I would always say, it seems like everybody's saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. It seems like it, and the more I started to look for difference, just because maybe it's me, maybe I don't get it. I'm looking for difference. Mr. Emerson, I call him Mr. Emerson, was my first companion on this journey. And, other ascended masters just simply agree. Also adding their flavor and richness to the whole concept of oneness and how that unfolds. It really has its root in the same thing, the oneness. So it feels like you're saying the same thing, only on an institutional level, which to me makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
What happened to us that we split? And that's not to say, oh, you guys split because of this. It's everywhere. People split over the same stuff.
Right. Right. And there's my favorite part about all this, the main difference between New Thought and what you refer to as traditional religion is summed up by the commercials from the 1970s. You can save by cutting out the middleman. So we don't. You don't have to talk to somebody to get to the divine. That divine power and presence abides within. That's what New Thought is based on. That the thought that we're having is a new thought that's as creative as any thought that's ever happened throughout history. We don't have to ask anybody a special favor or get dispensation or do something special to deserve to have whatever the good is that we're looking for. And so we're cutting out the middleman. And of course, that also means that we have to deal with the truth of ourselves. This retreat that we did was called Deep Within. And one of the things that we do when we go deep within is we can recognize the talents and gifts and skills that we have and bring those out into the world. And also understand what our injuries are, what our false beliefs are, what are the things that are holding us back. And that's becomes the controlling factor. So what we're cutting out when we get rid of the middleman is it's just us and our internal demons and our internal gifts. And it's not somebody out there deciding what's going to happen. And on the one hand, when somebody gets it, it is hugely empowering. And when somebody is afraid of it, there's every reason in the world not to do it. What? I'm creating my own experience and I don't like it? How could that possibly be? No. Can I please have somebody else to blame?
But I guess I'm the one that stands there in the middle, asking this question. So what exactly are you afraid of?
Right.
And people will continue to talk until, and it comes back again. So what exactly are you afraid of? And to me, it's like continuing to peel it back, or what's the other, whatever the other term is, until you answer that question. And when you answer that question, we're all the same. It's like, what am I losing here? And even if I do lose, what is it exactly I may gain, from losing? So I'm hugely compassionate when it comes to the fear thing, because I know that that's at the root of all these arguments, whether it's institutional or personal. It's what
Louise
are you afraid of?
Louise Hay spent an entire career doing healing. Her breakthrough book was You Can Heal Your Life. And it was about getting to that point of transformation where we could experience healing. And she was a religious science practitioner in her early days, and she knew how to do healing work for other people. And she did it on a grand scale, and she did it on an individual scale. And she wrote that through all of the people that she worked with and all of the prayer work that she did, the universal fear belief, the universal false belief that people were dealing with is that they felt they were unworthy. Whatever it was that they wanted and I'm going to include us, whatever it is that we want in our life that we're not experiencing, somewhere there is a fear that we don't deserve it. And once we get past that fear and realize that we are as deserving as anyone and this good can be ours, then it opens up. But that's what makes it a spiritual transformation rather than a self-help affirmation, because we're dealing with a deep-seated belief, and we need to deal with the belief rather than just claiming the new experience that we want.
Yep, sure. Yeah. I my roots start in psychology, and I used to reject that in terms of religion and spirituality. Well, I won't say spirituality, but in religion, the first thing you do is throw away everything that you ever knew about anything that made sense. So, I try to work around it. But then, you come full circle. Because truth never changes. It's always there. I don't think it runs away from you. It's just there. And so, I believe that we know the truth. We've met the truth, not the truth, but we've met many truths in our life. And then the cloud lifts and it fits in when it fits in. But my mind went back to psychology. And what was so exciting about that was I was 16 when I went to college. And I was I had a strict upbringing. You do as you're told. So you don't necessarily get to think. You don't need to think. Just do what you're told. And I get to college, and one of my professors, the first one I had, was a psychology professor. She gave an assignment, and I'm waiting for her to tell me what to do. And she said, "You figure it out." And I thought, but I'm not allowed, right? I'm not allowed to do that because I have to do what's right. But long story short, she pushed, and it dawned on me in that very first class that I'm allowed to think, and I can, and I'm good at it. And oh my God. So I then became a double major in psychology and blah, blah, blah. and so now so much makes sense because we have all that we need to know within us, or access to it, however you want to look at it. And there is that fear again that expresses itself in so many, or manifests itself in so many different ways. For me, it was scared to think because I'm not allowed. I'm going to get punished.
Right.
So somebody says, okay, is it any different now? If we deal with what is you're fearful of, and you use the term empowerment, you are hugely empowered when you start to think about, I had that thought a couple of times. Maybe I can think. Maybe it's okay if I dissect this idea and come up with the idea that we're all the same. So I think the path is really exciting, but it's a big job, and it takes everybody, with all of our varied skills on different levels.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. And that whole deservability thing is not I deserve all the good. Because on the one hand, I do, but it's not like I'm going to sit here in greedy toddler mode and say, gimme, 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 gimme. It's more important to understand that we are not undeserving. So there's nothing that's pre-established that says no matter what happens, you ain't going to get it. So when we let go of that opens the floodgates. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what happens with an awakened path about that.
Yeah, it's a little bit, I'm not sure about the New Thought side because I don't know what hangups New Thought people may have about being undeserving.
It's the same as everyone.
But I clearly understand it where on the other side of the street. So I absolutely know exactly where to meet you and exactly how to extend this olive branch and help you do that. But on this side, I'm thinking maybe it's my idea that New Thought and spirituality are above that. You don't have those kind of concerns anymore. You're deserving. What are you talking about? I can't compute that because I'm thinking like you guys already know this.
Well, no, you just spent 35 years working through it before you came to the point saying, wait a second, I do deserve this. And other people, it's not a process that we work through, but you get into the New Thought teaching and suddenly that's not there. So that's not necessarily brought in, but there's so much in our culture that tells us that we're undeserving. We have to work really hard in order for some good to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then it's because we haven't applied ourselves or come from the right family or done the right things or thought the right ideas. And that part is the part that's not true. And everybody gets to unlearn that.
That's like, who told you that? I asked somebody, who said that exactly? Like, who were they at the God level that told you that and you believed it?
Yeah, and I understand the question. I also would point out that if you grew up in a kitchen in the 1960s or 70s and said, who thought avocado counters were a good idea? They just were. Everybody had them. And now nobody has them. So an idea just took hold and everybody understood it and everybody observed it. And it was just sort of baked in. And it's the same way. It's so baked into our culture, into our families, into our society, into the infrastructure that, unless we stop and really question it, as you say, what are you afraid of? People don't bother looking at it and gloss right over it, and thereby leave to the side a lot of things that are hugely powerful that can bring transformation into life.
Let me take it to bring something up that I would very gently do on the other side of the street. When I said enough is enough, Jesus went out with the whole thing. You know, I didn't, you're out because you're just out. Mm-hmm. But then the more I read and, you know, like settled myself down and say, okay, then let's really think about this, because you're willing to hear from everybody else. So perhaps you have been given, you've been misled about Jesus as well. So give the guy a break and look, okay, so then Ernest Holmes did it. Like, he knocked it out of the park when he said that Jesus is not the great exception. Yep. You know, and I thought, okay, the great example, that changes everything.
Yeah.
And you know, to me, it's like peeling back the layers. Okay, now, what are you afraid of? You're afraid of this Jesus. You're afraid of, okay, let's deal with that. You know, right. It's all kind of little stuff. And that's one of the biggies right there. Not the only one, but that's a pretty much biggie. And when you look at him through the eyes that Ernest Holmes, the lens that he gave, the great example changes everything. And suddenly the fear goes away with these, the realization of something, and thinking. Being allowed to think is a good starting place, not to be afraid of thinking and entertaining your own ideas. Why do I feel this way? And think with yourself and offer yourself constructive criticism. You know, win your own argument, right? Win your own argument. And when you're finished, freedom, you know, you're empowered. Yeah.
I completely agree with Ernest Holmes, and he didn't make that up. He noticed that Jesus actually said, "All this I do, you can do, and more." And Holmes said, "Really? Really? What does that mean?" "Oh, that means that you're showing us how, and then we get to do it ourselves." And that becomes tremendously empowering. Let's take another break, and then we're going to come back and do a very empowering prayer. It's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at bethelight.com. That's b-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at bethelight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you, and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
A wonderful conversation about an awakened path, and new possibilities, and new thought, and coming together, and lots of fun topics. And the one that I like particularly, and the one that we're going to incorporate into our prayer to close the program today, is about deservability. The biggest fear that most people have is that they don't deserve the good that they are seeking, that there is something out there that's being kept back, held away, or withheld from them because they don't deserve it. And this is so universal throughout humanity, that it is an absolute point of transformation when we realize that we do deserve all of the good that's available. And it's not like everything in the universe is going to get handed to us on a silver platter. What it means is that which is particularly important for us, that which we are willing to focus our energy and intention and attention onto, we can bring into our experience because we are not undeserving of it. There might be steps that we get to take to participate in the good that we're seeking, but it's not being held back by some external power that says, nope, not for you. So the prayer today is about deservability. So when we're thinking about our own personal deservability, we don't start with ourselves. We start with that one infinite creative power, that one divine presence, that one limitless love, that one that is sharing itself as all of its creation. That creative power that has been creating since the very beginning of time, that has created everything. All of the galaxies, all of the stars, all of the planets, all of the people, all of the particles, all of the plants, everything is that one divine presence expressed in its own way. We are all that same divine presence. It's not like it's possible that divine presence, that God essence, is everywhere in the universe around me, 14.2 billion light years across, except the 3-foot sphere around me. It is not possible that any of us are excluded from that goodness. We are all that divine presence taking our own particular form. And knowing that that's true, I know that anything is possible. Anything is possible. The divine doesn't do any second-rate work. It's not like this part of creation is perfect, and then there's some seconds that go into the hand-me-down shop or onto the special rack. It's not possible. It is not possible. It is all divine. It is all that God essence expressed in its own way. And when I say it includes me and each of us and all of the activities that we're involved in. Everything is that one divine presence expressed in its own way. And therefore, the good that's available everywhere is available anywhere and is available to us. There is no power anywhere in the universe that obstructs our deservability of the good that is available. There is nothing that blocks our connection from the infinite. It is indwelling. It is not just available within. It is the truth of what we are. It is the center and circumference of our being. That divine presence is right here, right now, as me and as each of us. And so the good that we are seeking is available to us. And as we let go of our disbelief, as we let go of the sense of limitation or thought that it can't possibly happen for us, as we get quiet and allow that still small voice to suggest our next perfect steps, we gain a new understanding of that which is ours to do, that which is ours to let go of, and the wonderful ways that we can participate in bringing this newness about. So that's what I'm claiming for each of us in our own way, to participate in that creative process that is bringing this newness about, to understand that we fully deserve all of the good that we are seeking. There is no obstruction to it, and as we open to it, the universe provides. I'm so grateful for it. Grateful for the good, grateful for the ability to speak this word of intention and release it into that same creative power that has created everything, and to know it's now creating this. And so I let it be. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.